Good morning.
Actually, we have a good story, so I'd love to.
I call to order this meeting of the Board of Regents of the University of Minnesota. First order of business is approval of the minutes. It's an action item. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
I move it.
There is now a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? Not hearing any. Would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Next item is report of the President. President Kaler, would you please share your report with us?
Thank you, Chair Beeson. Please allow me to highlight a few key events, developments, and accomplishments since we last formally met 2 months ago. Of course, many of you traveled with about 20,000 other Gopher fans to Orlando and the Citrus Bowl football game around New Year's Day. It was a remarkable outpouring of support for the university and our athletics program. But even more than the energy in and around Orlando during those days, other data reveals extraordinary interest locally in the game. More than half of all of the TV sets that were in use in the Twin Cities market that afternoon watched the game for a total of almost 500,000 viewers. Those are remarkable numbers, and if there's any doubt that athletics is one of the key touch points for Minnesotans to this university, I think that data dispels that idea. Popular support for the university is further displayed in our recent public opinion polling. It's one we conduct annually, and this one was taken after the November election. Two key questions reveal a public sentiment that should bode well for our advocacy at the legislature this session, and it shows that most Minnesotans believe that our partnership with the state must be rebalanced. And here are some important numbers. Nearly 70% of Minnesotans believe the university is not getting enough funding from the state, which is up more than 4 percentage points since last year. And 1/4 of Minnesotans think the university should be mostly funded by state support, with the clear majority stating that, at the very least, we should be evenly funded by state and tuition dollars. In our current biennial budget request, we're seeking enough funding to enable a tuition freeze, and we believe this public opinion polling should indicate to our political leaders that, in fact, supporting the university is a popular thing to do. While we are thankful for the $32.6 million that Governor Dayton has put in his budget over the next 2 years, there's still much work to be done. We have real costs and increases fueled by inflation, salaries, new technology, and enhancements to student services, among other drivers. As it now stands, Governor Dayton's budget proposal will mean that tuition will have to be raised slightly. I don't want to do that, and I don't think you want to do that. But when it comes to tuition, there are two essential sources to support our students and their families: the state and the students themselves. And what's changed since 1997 is who pays for the excellent education we provide. And the tuition increases are linked directly to state disinvestment. My aim is simply to rebalance our partnership and return the public to the state's only public land-grant research university. We need to work harder with our legislators, and we're doing that. Critical voices are those of our students. Last week at our legislative action kickoff, Joel Stangler, the president of the Minnesota Student Association, spoke to about 200 citizen and staff advocates here on our Twin Cities campus with advocates from around the state, and she added up in real terms what a freeze would mean to her and her family. It would mean for her 250 fewer hours of work that could be used to impact her ability to graduate on time. It would mean money saved to allow her to take an unpaid internship that would lead her to her career path or to volunteer in a community organization. The tuition freeze, she said, means, and I'm quoting, financial freedom and a greater ability to engage in all the opportunities the university has to offer. And that's what I want for all of our students, and I know this board does too. Now, I do believe we are solidifying our message of the economic and innovative power we have as the only comprehensive research university in Minnesota. And we have new metrics to prove it, external metrics, not just my biased belief that we're really doing well. For the first time, the respected Center for Measuring University Performance, which is based at Arizona State University, has reported that we are in the top 25 rankings in 9 different and diverse categories. And the slide that will come up in a minute shows you that. So these are the rankings. We're ranked 8th in total research, 9th in federal research, and you can read the rest, 12th in National Academy members, and 25th in our entering class scores. So this provides both data and point of pride. For the first time, we are ranked in the top 25 in all 9 of these categories. That's remarkable. There are 9 other public research universities in the country that are in these same top quartile categories. So if you want to say this is a top 10 public research university in the United States, you can say that because it is true, and this data shows it. The other peers are UC Berkeley, UCLA, Florida, Illinois, Michigan, Texas, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Wisconsin at Madison. So since I've become president, I've said we must be among the conversation about the nation's best public research universities, and we are, not just in funding, but in honors and the quality of our students and faculty. Let me turn now to a few other items. Earlier this week, I had the chance to speak with and meet key leaders of our state's dairy community at the Dairy Growth Summit in St. Paul. That event was designed to tackle some of the challenges now facing the dairy industry, and our faculty, students, researchers, and extension educators are working closely with dairy producers and processors. We're partnering with industry to seek solutions, a partnership that, of course, dates back to our land grant origins. And I express to the dairy industry leadership our continued commitment to that important partnership in the entire agricultural community in the state. As you may have read, our partners at Fairview have gone through a leadership change. We're delighted that our medical school dean, Brooks Jackson, is now part of Fairview's interim CEO team. And with his leadership, I'm confident that during this transition period, we'll continue to move forward our vision for University of Minnesota Health and its clinical partnership with Fairview. Meanwhile, at our College of Science and Engineering, Michael Tsapatsis, a chemical engineering and material science professor, was recently elected to the National Academy of Engineering. Election to the NAE is among the highest professional distinction awarded an engineer, and I'm pleased to have him join that club. Another exciting development is that the University of Minnesota Libraries, in partnership with the Penumbra Theater Company, received a grant from the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation to support the adoption and use of UMBRA, Search African American History. It's a freely available online search tool that will provide access to digital materials on African American history and culture from around the country. And it's a testament to the quality of our libraries that we are a leader in this effort to pull together important pieces of African American history and place them in the hands of a new generation. Let me now talk a bit about the events at Morrill Hall last Monday. As you know, a sit-in by some students and former students resulted in arrest. During the sit-in, we had good conversations with the protesters, and I believe we advanced meaningful and sincere responses to their concerns. However, what was disappointing to me about the day was that those who sat in, others in the community, and I share the goals of achieving greater diversity, of affordability, and of a more welcoming campus. Ironically, on most of these issues, we're on the same side. I have been advocating for, and we've been making progress on these fronts since I became president. But we must get there together in partnership and with respect for the law and each other. I'm confident that we will successfully move the needle on achieving these goals for equity, diversity, and a welcoming campus climate. So in closing, we are now halfway through the fiscal year, believe it or not, and you are now receiving a status report on my annual work plan. It's a snapshot of where we are today, our accomplishments, and the work we still have to do. So with that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report.
Thank you, President Kaler. For my report, I'd like to take a few minutes to recognize several of our colleagues, Regents Alan Frobenius, and with an asterisk, Regent Simmons.
Oh, we did have an asterisk.
For a couple of weeks, the infamous asterisk. I had the privilege of being elected into this office the same year these 3 regents were going for their second term. You find out a lot about people when you go through an election at the Minnesota legislature for the Board of Regents. And you find out not only about some things about the university, but also how people conduct themselves under pressure. And for me, this was the beginning of a extremely important and meaningful relationship as mentors and as friends. The informal and formal leadership that these people have taken. This has been an astounding 36 years collectively that these three people have done. I really can't say enough about their work individually and as a group, the friendship and the support that they provided. It's emotional. It's a difficult moment, and I know we want to talk about that for a little bit, and we're going to have a more formal event at some point in the summer to recognize all of you, but just on that note, I want to publicly just say how much I've appreciated your support in developing whatever capability I have. You've all spent a lot of time with me, especially early on as coming to this job, and it's a hard transition, and we all, as new regents, need that assistance. So I know my colleagues want to say some words, and I'll reserve some for the three of you. Regent Cohen?
I just want to add to what you said, Chair Beeson, thank you, because I think the word that comes to my mind for all three of these regents is wisdom. I think they bring an enormous amount of wisdom to our board in how they address issues, in the thoughtfulness that they have, and I think that will be the thing that I will miss the most that they have brought to this board. So with deep thanks to each of the three of you, and congratulations.
Thank you, Regent Cohen.
Mr. Chairman?
Regent Johnson.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, echo all the sentiments thus stated. And if I may say something just individually about our three colleagues today, the person I've known the longest is Regent Allen. He was Commissioner of Revenue when I was in the legislature, and knew of his work and his professionalism. And his dear wife Esther was Governor Al Quee's on Governor Quee's staff, so I got to know the Allens quite good during that tenure of time, and have continued in this good relationship on the board. Clyde, I describe you as one of the most kind and thoughtful people that I've encountered in my life. And Esther, certainly we've had good conversations, and we know that your son Scott is very much a part of us. When you were board chair, about early in my tenure here, about 3 weeks before the board meeting, I received a call. I saw the number was from Fargo, North Dakota, and the voice was, "There's no board meeting this month, Dean." And being new, I wasn't quite sure what all this meant, because I knew Scott was your son. And I had to think about that for a little bit. But Scott and I have developed a good friendship over these years, and Scott has become friends of many of us. And the thought I have, and the word you use often, Clyde, phrase is data-driven. What are the facts? And you have instructed us to look at the facts, and that is very good. So to you and Esther and Scott, on behalf of my wife Debbie and I, we wish you the very best. John Frobenius, one of the most analytical persons I have met my time in the legislature, in the military, and here. You drill down so deep, John, and ask those tough questions, and the rest of us are expected to think and drill deep with you. And you do it in a respectful way toward this administration and past administrations, and that's what makes this organization what it is today, especially in the matters of finance. And yes, we have become friends too, and I appreciate it on the golf course, and of course living fairly close, Wilmer and St. Cloud. Patty, one of the most renowned people I've met in my life when it comes to medicine, and simply caring about people. I've sat by you and your work at Mayo, and to you and Les, whatever your future holds, If you are successful coming back, we will welcome you, and we have become very good friends as well. Thinking about this, board members and President Kaler, potentially this is 36 years of experience that ends today. That is significant. The historical perspective you have of this university, of this board and its proceedings is significant. And yes, we will move on. We will have new people, but we want you to know that you have a place in history in this university and have contributed greatly. So on behalf of my wife, Debbie, who, Regent Allen, you talked to her earlier today. You always, all three of you and your spouses have been so welcoming to her after she moved up here from Nebraska. And she deeply appreciates it, as I do. So my very best to the three of you and your spouses. Thank you.
Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. Regent Johnson just summed up quite a bit. So I'll just say, Clyde, a wonderful perspective that also offers a very calming presence that will always be appreciated and remember. John, deeper than anyone else, always going deep and thoughtful insight. Yesterday I asked him a question and he willingly acknowledged that he was giving me more information than I asked for. But I appreciate that. And Patty, I say a force. You absolutely are in the best way possible and has even served as a reference on my behalf. And then I just want to thank your families, actually, for lending you all to us. This is a very time-consuming volunteer position. So thank you to your families as well.
Regent Devine.
I'm not sure that I can add a whole lot more to what has already been said here, but obviously my sincere thanks to all three of you and all of what you've done. And I certainly have appreciated the mentoring, the guidance, and the calming presence that all three of you have provided to me along the way in my acclimation here over the last 3 or so years. And there isn't a group here per se from the faculty or the staff or maybe even the students, but I would have to say that the appreciation on all three of those other groups is maybe not fully understood, but clearly your interactions and the actions that you've taken in those 36 combined years of service have left a long, long mark on the institution, and the outcomes of those decisions that you've been a part of making here have been very profound in bringing us to where we are today. And in highlighting the fact that the ranking that President Kaler just mentioned here a moment ago about it being one of the top 10 universities in the country, according to this latest information, you can walk out of this room today knowing that you were a significant part of making that come about here in your all three of your tenures over the last 12 years. And so with great appreciation and great humbleness, I thank you for your participation.
Regent Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just keep it simple. The word that comes to mind for all three is mentor, and I just want to thank you for the ways that you've mentored me and that you've mentored each one of the members of this board, and I am absolutely confident that the impact of you having sat in these seats for 1 year, 2 year, 12 years is something that is probably unmeasurable in terms of the positive impact on the university, on the state, and on the people who have come across you. So thank you very much for everything you've done for me and for all of us.
Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I think it's all been said, so I don't want to say it again. But as a rookie on this board, I think it's daunting to think of the three of you leaving. And all I know is that I got your email addresses, and you'll be hearing from us. So,
Regent Simmons, would you like to make any semi-final comments?
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you very much, Chair Beeson and colleagues, for those extraordinary remarks. I knew 12 years ago that it would be a great privilege to serve on this Board of Regents, but had no idea it would be so much work and so much joy. Really, truly joyful work, meaningful work. And this time has not only deepened my love for the state of Minnesota, but deepened my respect and appreciation for the quality and the power and the importance of this university. Of all the things I got to participate on during my service on this board, being trusted by my colleagues on the board to represent us as we went out looking for a new president was meaningful, and because of this board, successful. I thank you so much for the companionship, for the leadership, for the commitment, and the honor of serving with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Chair Beeson, and I guess thanks to all of you for the opportunity to serve. It's just been a privilege to have this opportunity. It's been a joy for myself and for Nancy. Special thank you to the staff, colleagues, for just the assistance, the courtesy, and the help that was given along the way. We may all bring some skills and some passion to our position on this board, but we can't be successful without some support and assistance from our colleagues, particularly Clyde's paper napkins. This really is a truly special place and a critical resource for the state, the country, and the world. To those of you who have the opportunity to serve going forward, I urge you to care for this place. I urge you to nourish it. I urge you to help it. And I urge you to challenge it. My experience has shown me that staff grows as a board grows. The stronger the board's performance, the stronger the staff's performance. Okay? The two feed off of each other. I don't need to say this, but I'll say it anyway. Regardless of what you do as you continue on this board and those that replace us, always keep in mind the students who thrive here, the folks who pay for it, and the state residents that benefit from this university. They're far more important than any of us as individuals on this board. It's, and by the way, take special care. Excuse me. Take special care of my favorite child in this organization, the Academic Health Center. As it is, reorganize it. It's working to reorganize its delivery system. It's getting great support to make some significant growth actions in our research mission. And it's also going through an enormous transformation of the healthcare delivery system as we have known it, and trying to figure out its role. There is no other service that we provided to you, and I know I offend some people when I say this, but I've always said there's one task I don't dare let get screwed up, and that's the academic health system of the University of Minnesota. It is critical to the state. There are organizational issues, there are facility issues, and there are transformation issues. And I'll give you the advice a couple people gave me along the way. Get them right, and don't screw it up. So the university is far better off than it was 12 years ago when we walked on this board. Its balance sheet is stronger, staff is stronger, it's gained some efficiencies, it's gained some national reputation. Students that are showing up to get their education in our place are better and better and better and better, and they're doing better here, and they're getting through it a whole lot quicker. So keep up the good work. I don't know how you'll survive without Clyde's paper napkin analysis. And let me know, and I'm sure my colleagues feel the same way, let me know how we can help. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Allen.
Well, first I should reveal a deep, dark secret. I cry easily on occasions like this. Kid movies, dog movies, and occasions like this, so I may have a hard time getting through this. But first of all, Dean was kind enough to mention my son, Scott, who was sitting down there in the blue shirt. Scott, stand up for a minute. Scott has walked every mile of this journey with me, and I've appreciated it. Let me just say a couple things. Simplified, I've been a little pigeonholed in this work. I think I served on one committee 1 year other than audit, finance, and facilities. And that's important work. And to put it in a nutshell, I'll put it this way. a faculty member at my former work. I was a little Fitzenreiter at another institution before I came here. And a faculty member once said to me, you know, you're always pinching pennies. And I said, yes, and I'm proud of that, because when you as faculty and staff have good ideas, we've got the dollars to spend. And that's the reason we work so carefully at that. Second thought I have is that we live in eras in this world. We went through new normal, and now we're in the era of metrics. Everywhere you go, you hear metrics, and they're important. And the ones that the President spoke about today are important, and they tell us where we are as a university. But I think the essence of a great research university is that it does not try to measure everything. You don't know the value of some of the basic scientific research. You don't know the value of poetry or music or what have you for decades later. And so you measure what you should. We don't always do that. We measure what we can sometimes, but we need lots more that we should measure. But we do that in order that you have the luxury of not measuring everything. Because that indeed, I think, is the essence of a great university. And finally, I just want to say that, you know, we came to this university 12 years ago, and you have shown us good times, good entertainment, culturally and sports-wise. You've given us good food, but more importantly, you've shown us the wonders of science and the beauty of the poetry and the other humanities. And finally, most importantly, you have surrounded me and my family with love and care. And I am deeply appreciative of that forever. Thank you.
President Kaler, would you like to have the final?
I would, thank you. Regent Simmons, I'll start with you. You led the search committee that hired me, and I will always appreciate the care and detail you brought to that effort. I'm grateful for the decision. I've had several members of the search committee tell me that they were the vote that broke the tie, but I think it might have been you. Thank you. I'm very glad you found me, and I will say for the record, the classy and frankly so impressive face of the university you portrayed in that did wonders for me, and I'm sure for many other candidates to be attracted to this job. Thank you. Regent Frobenius, your detail and attention to the university's finances and operational excellence agenda have taught me a great deal. And on behalf of the staff, I will tell you officially that you ask hard questions. Your knowledge of the changing landscape of healthcare in Minnesota has been a guiding force in my understanding of our challenges and our opportunities, and believe me, we will not screw that up. Regent Allen was the chair of the board when I was hired. Clyde, I will always be grateful for your welcoming spirit and your role as a mentor to me upon my arrival. And I will always be impressed by your dear affection for Heeper and your ability to painlessly drive back and forth from Moorhead with the university's accountability report in your trunk. And I will simply say that you are truly one of the finest people I have ever met. And to all of you, thank you so much for your service to the university and personally for your extraordinary support and warmth to my wife, Karen, and me. Thank you.
From a very grateful university. Thank you.
Well, Chair Beeson, that turned out to be more emotional than we thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay, well, we'll gather ourselves here and move forward. We do have a consent agenda. Part of the All University Honors Committee, gifts, summary of expenditures. This is a review and action item today.
Move approval?
Second.
There is a motion and now a second. Is there any discussion under this item? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Next is the 2014 University Plan Performance and Accountability Report, and this is established by, actually mandated in our Constitution and established by board policy as one of the fundamental planning documents here at the University of Minnesota. The board did review the report last month. Provost Hanson, do you have any comments you'd like to make before we take action on this document?
Just briefly, I'm pleased to present the final version of the plan and accountability report to you. It was the draft version in December. And the report does make clear in many ways in which the university is accountable. It attempts to connect the dots of the various data points to the mission of the university. It includes the metrics we watch because they're measures, partial measures, as Regent Allen has so eloquently pointed out, of our success at our teaching, research, and outreach missions. You gave us feedback at the time. We appreciated that. We incorporated it. The final version has minor updates and adjustments to the copy, but all the significant findings are the same. We've provided the report in your docket materials and in a spiral-bound version with that highlights brochure in the pocket. So I bring the report forward and recommend it for your approval.
Board, I believe we are ready to vote on this matter, but is there any discussion before I call for a motion? I'll entertain a motion. Regional Murray, did you have a comment first?
Yes, and then I'll make the motion. I just want to say thank you. I know this is a lot of hard work, but this is one of the fundamental components of our reporting on behalf of the university, and it's well done and a long process, and thank you for taking our considerations from the last meeting as well. So with that, I'll move approval.
There is a motion then. Is there a second?
Second.
Regent Cohen, a second. Any final discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you, Provost Hanson and your staff for the months and months of work associated with this document. Next item is Board of Regents policy, appointments to organization and boards. We discussed proposed amendments to the Board of Regents policy, appointments to organizations and board at our December 12, 2014 meeting. Several adjustments were made based on conversations and comments from that discussion. Mr. Steves, will you please walk us through the proposed changes before we vote on adopting the amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the board, there were two changes made to the policy since you last reviewed it. The first is that in Section 3, there is now language that provides for a special selection committee of 3 regents to review nominations for the boards of University of Minnesota Health and the Fairview Health Services Board of Directors prior to those recommendations coming to the full board for action. So there'll be, that committee will review it and make a recommendation to the full board, and the full board will then vote on it. And the second change is that there was language that had been proposed to align the policy with previous board action on the UMOR Development LLC, but pending board action later in your agenda, that language was removed at this point in time.
Any discussion on these proposed amendments? Regent Frobenius.
Just to express an appreciation for the process here, that the changes in the appointments relative to the Fairview Board and the involvement of a broader segment of the board in that process. Appreciate that addition, and I do believe that will bring value to the Academic Health Center mission to have that involvement, to that critical element. Thank you.
Any other discussion about the proposed amendments to this policy? Could I get a motion then?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second for this. Would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Thank you for that input from last month to today. Okay, as Mr. Steves indicated, we are, next item on the agenda is a resolution related to the reorganization of Umore Park Development Project. We have some presenters that will be coming up to the table, and while they're assembling, President Kaler, would you start us off with some initial comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Since I became president, a number of key outstanding questions about Umore Park have remained only partially answered or have been unanswered altogether. In particular, I've long wanted to better understand important questions related to our agricultural research enterprise there, the environmental contamination, costs associated with development, and how the 2008 vision relates to current market conditions in this post-recession economy. And so to answer those questions, I asked a group of senior leaders and deans in October to examine 6 questions and make recommendations related to these issues. And specifically, I asked them to focus on 1, a plan and cost estimates for resolving environmental concerns, including removal of concrete remains from the Gopher Ordnance Works. 2, the value of research activity and a plan for replacing agricultural crops disrupted by gravel mining. 3, to identify costs and or potential lost income from relocating current Umore Park activities. 4, to determine if there's a business case for continued direct university involvement in the ongoing planning and development of the property. 5, whether the university brings special expertise or value in directing the future course of the property, or whether the private sector and market should have a greater role, and whether the vision needs updating. And finally, given our investment in Umore Park over the past decade, should current activity be curtailed until the other 5 issues are addressed and agreed to by the board? The result of the senior leaders' work is a new report with significant new analyses on some issues and a much more robust understanding than we've had to date of the costs of the lost agricultural research and development. Their report concludes by recommending a new, more market-driven and market-sensitive direction and vision for Umore Park. We have visitors from the City of Rosemont with us today. Mayor Bill Drosty and the City Administrator Dwight Johnston are here. If you gentlemen would stand or wave, that's good. Thank you. Welcome. Pleased to have you here. I'm also thankful to the Umore Park LLC for its important work over the years, particularly that of Regent Emeritus Michael O'Keefe and its leadership to get us to this point. Thank you all. So I've asked Vice Presidents Fitzenreiter and Wheelock, General Counsel Donahue, and Dean Boer of CFANS to summarize the findings of the report and present a resolution in support of those recommendations and in support of a revised vision. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, President Kaler. Good morning, presenters.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we'll orchestrate all 4 of us taking you through some highlights on the planning and development activities that have occurred to date, talk about the environmental conditions, the research impacts from gravel mining and potential development, some additional financial impacts that we learned in the course of answering President Kaler's questions, then talk about the revised vision, and then get into questions and comments from the board about the resolution. Just to put it in context, this map shows you Umore Park, located in, you can see in sort of the upper left corner here, the City of Rosemont. You can see to the south of the property, the Vermilion Highlands Research and Recreation and Wildlife Management Area that, of course, was created as a result of the agreement with the state of Minnesota for funding $137 million of bonds for TCF Bank Stadium. That property still belongs to the University of Minnesota, but will be provided to the state once the last payment is made on the stadium bonds by the state of Minnesota. With respect to planning and development activities, as the President mentioned, significant progress has been made since 2006. Some of those key accomplishments include completing the concept master plan in January of 2009. The board created the Legacy Fund in October of 2009. The board approved and executed a mining contract, and all the permits were necessary to begin that mining in November of 2012, and the mining itself actually began in the fall of 2011. The city also of Rosemont also led, and we worked with them on completing an alternative urban area-wide review, and that was completed in August of 2013. All of these actions and many more that have occurred since 2006 have made the property ready for development. I'm going to turn now to my colleague, General Counsel Bill Donahue, to take you through some of the environmental conditions and costs. And there's a few maps as well that we'll get to here.
Right. My job is to talk to you a little bit about the environmental conditions out at Umore Park, and they all emanate from the fact that in the 1940s, the U.S. Army built a smokeless gunpowder facility out there under contract with DuPont. It was constructed in the 1940s to support the effort in the Second World War. The plant was operated for several months and only one of two of the industrial lines out there. And if you could show this is what it looked like in 1945. It is a very large site located on thousands of acres. It was deeded to the university by the federal government in 1947 and 1948 as war surplus. And there are two categories of environmental problems that actually emanate from, we believe, their construction of the facility and their operation of the facility. And the first of those is that there are contaminants in limited portions of the soil at the site as a result of their activities. And if you would go to the next, this is a map which shows the areas of known releases. And that is a map that was prepared by a consultant for the University of Minnesota. It shows various forms of releases. The most serious of those are releases that exceed the industrial standards for those sites. They're very limited. There's small amounts of them. The exceedances occur with polyaromatic hydrocarbons, lead, and mercury. Those are the three elements of concern. There is nothing there that is so prevalent to be a human health concern, but there are hot spots that have to actually be cleaned up. The second item that is really important with respect to, I think, environmental conditions has to do with the ruins that are out there. If you go back to the previous slide, you can see many of those were taken down, but there are literally hundreds of facilities out there that have been sort of half demolished, that the slabs remain, all of that kind of stuff. So we've done a fair amount of environmental study with respect to the site over many, many years. The most recent one was in 2012. We have worked with the PCA to attempt to make sure that we are in compliance with their requirements. We have spent many years trying to get the Corps of Engineers to take responsibility for some portion of the cost of doing all of this. We have had some, I think, at least modest movement in that in the last few months. And it is our hope that within the next year or so we will have an agreement with the Corps to help pay for at least some of this. It is our belief that we will be required to clean up the hot spots. It's likely that some of that cleanup will be required to take place within the next year or so. And that is where the exceedances occur. However, we believe that most of the cleanup that has to do with contaminants out there should await development, that it should be coordinated with the development. That's the appropriate and cost-effective way to do it. That's the way it is done with respect to all other sites in the state of Minnesota. And as indicated on the slide, the cost of both cleanup and removal is somewhere between $20 and $28 million based on the existing master plan. I think that will change as a result of the activities today, and hopefully that will reduce the costs of this particular effort somewhat as we go to a market-driven land use. So that's it with respect to the environmental conditions. I think I should wait till the end to take questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, just to set the stage for the next discussion, this map, again, of the Umore Park property shows you to what would be the west side of the property where the sand and gravel EIS study area was and where the current mining contract is located. And I want to turn to my colleague, Dean Brian Burr, to describe for you the impacts of on the overall site with respect to research, but in particular in the mining lease area.
Regent Beeson, members of the committee, thank you very much for listening to us today. The Rosemont Umore Park Research Center is part of a network of 10 research and outreach centers across Minnesota that we engage in landscape-based and external applied research in cropping systems, natural resource systems. Umore Park is particularly unique because it does have very high-quality soils and is well-suited to that sort of research. In addition, it focuses primarily on issues of agricultural productivity, so how to expand our ability to improve yields and so on limited acreage, and reducing our pressure on natural resources, and including climate change implications for agricultural research and how it can mitigate or improve cropping systems to achieve some of those goals. The other part of that is from an educational perspective, our workforce development piece. For graduate students and undergraduate students, it gives them a proximate opportunity to go out and oftentimes as they're doing their research, collect data on a daily basis oftentimes. And we can do research there that's quite different from the St. Paul campus, the land base there, because there's actually proximate cropping pressures from other areas. So if you think of pest and disease issues, for example, you want to have a replicate of land that is affected by other cropping systems. Of course, in the middle of St. Paul, there aren't a lot of other agricultural lands around us that are being cropped to provide some of that spillover that happens to that research. So it's kind of this unique aspect that allows students to get there to do similar research that we do in our other research and outreach centers, and also sort of gets us in that rural interface that a lot of it depends on. There are currently about 518 acres that were used for crop research, and mention climate change as well, because there is a station out there that is doing climate research on the interactions between ground level crop systems. So how do plants respire, take up carbon from the atmosphere, how is that captured, and then how is that released back to a higher level into the atmosphere, so you can see that interaction and what happens if we have appropriate crop systems that take up carbon and then release oxygen back into the atmosphere. It also provides income support for other regional outreach centers. Because of its productivity, it generates income that helps us support research that may not otherwise be accomplished. Right now, and if you go to the land or the maps, thank you. These colored portions to the left-hand side are basically the primary research plots, and as Fitz suggested, those are being overlaid by the mining. And right now, the mining is kind of in that upper left-hand quadrant is where there's currently mining occurring, and the southern part is not yet mined. That's still agricultural research. And one of the things we're looking at is trying to preserve that for a longer period of time as part of this. We did some financials on those returns to grants as well as the returns from income, and it came to about $71.4 million over the 40-year horizon that you'd be mining gravel and developing this. That's essentially the value of the research from grants and income losses that would be displaced. So the recommendation that came up, and there's been already some preliminary discussions with Dakota Aggregates, to try to get a longer-term moratorium on mining that southeast region or southwest region, that's not in play yet. And part of that would allow us both to do often our research is multi-year inherently. You get one cropping season per year in many cases, so that ability to run through multiple years, so to have 15 or 25 years allows us to transition if we need to those lands and experiments more effectively. And it does allow us to look at, we're strategically looking at what is the future of agricultural research and what are the necessities and facilities or assets required to do that. So that ability to start to think about how do we plan this out more effectively is a critical part of that request. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in addition to what my colleagues have mentioned about the potential environmental costs and how we would approach that, the impact on research, in the course of answering President Kaler's questions about what are the other financial impacts, we did do a deep dive into those aspects, and we have a cost estimate that would occur spread over the 40 to 50 year development timeline, but in today's dollars, roughly $25.8 million. For example, we recently learned through some research on the land that there's a 4-inch natural gas pipeline that runs in the underground on the northeast side of the property. That will cost $1.1 million to relocate. There is I think it's 24 or 25 families among families that farm 77 acres right on 42. Inevitably, we'll need to move them to another location, and we've found a location for them further south in Vermilion Highlands, so we're in discussions with those folks to determine, but moving them will cost money because we'll need to have a lead time, and for example, they don't currently have a well where they are, so we bring the water to them. There's no structures there, so we also have to move, could cost up to $1 million to move the beef research property. There's roughly a $12 million estimate to relocate a turkey facility, although that turkey facility has got to be moved way downline, but it is a cost the university will face. And as I said, these will be spread over the 40 to 50-year development horizon. I'd like to turn to my colleague, Vice President Pam Wheelock, to take us through what is the proposed revised vision for the Umar Park property, and then we'll get to the resolution and questions.
Thank you. Vice President Wheelock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, President Kaler, Regents. So these things remain true. We believe that this is an exceptional site and that the concept master plan still provides good guidance about what's possible. We believe that mixed use is a great opportunity for development on that site, and we continue to believe that the development will occur over a long period of time, over a matter of decades. And on an interim basis, we will continue to generate revenues through gravel mining and other leases and conduct important research. But just like with any planning process, at some point you move to execution. So these are issues that we are now tackling as we move to execution, and we know that some adjustments are going to be required from thinking that may have existed a handful of years ago. We are clarifying that the development needs to be market sensitive and clarifying that it will not occur through significant university subsidy. We are clarifying that we intend to work as strong partners with the City of Rosemont and with other jurisdictions as appropriate to plan and advance development. And we are clarifying that the critical research plots are in our interest to continue to have access to with more predictability for longer period of times, and an intention to work with Dakota Aggregates to have more clarity about those terms and certainty about our access. And we also know more than we did even a handful of years ago about the environmental conditions that exist on the site, and we are working in partnership with the federal partners and with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to establish responsibility and a time frame for remediation. All development, of course, is subject to further action by the Board of Regents. So we present those recommendations to you on behalf of the staff that have been working on this and President Kaler. And with that, Mr. Chair, we would be available for any questions.
Thank you, presenters. I'll just make a chair's comment. This was one of the first votes that I took when I came on back in 2009, and somebody made a comment at that point that this site was so large, so complex, with so many pre-existing conditions that it almost defied planning, let alone development. Well, the original planners of this project did good work, and I want to recognize some of the university people that spent a lot of time trying to create some forum out of this really, really unique project. Out of that, we have begun the mining. We've acquired additional knowledge as to the site. The market has changed, obviously, and that's why going back to our partners, both in the community and elsewhere, the other stakeholders, it seems appropriate at this point to do that. And this board will reserve the right to approve development agreements, will approve the right to dispose of land, but this, and the fact that we've made a policy decision about retaining research on the site is also something that is critical now to the rest of the planning on the site going forward. But thank you for the work. This is it's an ongoing project that this board will stay engaged in. With that, I'll open up for other comments. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you also, the four of you and your staffs, for good work. Just a question, and that is, I believe that good policy involves being good neighbors. And I know that the city of Rosemont, Empire Township, Dakota County, all have a vested interest in this project. Are you comfortable at this point in time where our relationship with these three entities and the university is pending the passage of this resolution?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Vice President Fitzgerald.
I think the university is comfortable. I believe the city could comment themselves, but I think we have a good working relationship with them. And I think they understand where we're headed, and we're anxious to get going on that and engage with them in this discussion, because this is a long-term effort. And it's going to take, like I said, 40 to 50 years of a relationship here to get this done.
Mr. Chairman?
Regent Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it's appropriate or not. I know the mayor and city administrator here. Is it appropriate to have them give a comment about this resolution? If not, it's your decision, but
The chair would entertain that. I don't want to put the local officials on the spot. If they do wish to introduce themselves and have any comments, whether they're official or unofficial, they could do that or not. It's
Mr. Chair, I'm not making a request. I'm just giving them opportunity, spending your.
Yes. Good morning. Sorry
Good morning,
Sorry to bring you
Mr.
up to the docket here. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Board, I'm Bill Drosty, Mayor of Rosemont. I appreciate this opportunity. I do not have anything prepared, but I would say, understanding the complexity of this whole project, we are, from my perspective, supporting your action today. Realizing there will be many things along the way that we will have to address in the future.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We appreciate those. We appreciate those comments.
And thank you.
And thank you for your ongoing partnership with the University of Minnesota. This project is so unique, and it absolutely requires that strong relationship with our communities. Regent Broad, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've been pretty open about my concerns about the university being in the business of private development and potentially competing against private developers or driving that private development. But strategic change is difficult, and I think, Mr. President, you and your team have hit the exact right approach for this strategic change. I think this approach is much more mission-focused. I think this strategic change allows us to really move this area in more, from my perspective, a more appropriate direction. And I think it's a bold move. I think it's an appropriate move, and I strongly support what you're doing.
Thank you, Regent Broad. Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. It's interesting that one of the difficulties with long-term board members is that you have selective memories of past years' discussions. And I think I have some selective memories. Fitz and I have had this debate about what some of these earlier discussions were about. It's always been a concern of this board about getting into the development business out there. Quite frankly, the initial decisions, as I perceive them, were that we were interested in trying to generate some resources out of the mining process. The trade-off with the state on the wildlife contribution to public use, which it's so much fun to hear how that's referred to today, because 10 years ago that was being referred to as absolutely unrelated to the funding of the stadium. And obviously it was related to the funding of the stadium very, very closely. But the point is that we kind of kept getting sucked back into this development role at a higher level than we had any sense to be in. We should not be in the private development business at all. And the danger of us being involved is that there's a couple things. Number one, we're a deep pocket in this process, and there's a lot of money that has to be spent clearing the land. And it's not just going out and chopping down the trees and building houses, but it's chopping down concrete buildings, it's dealing with contaminated sites, and it's also impacting our research and requiring a transition period. The one bit of data that's new out of this study we didn't have in our past decisions was the $71.4 million estimated present value of the evolution of research over a period of time. That was sort of presented as saying, well, we've got some research projects going on out there, and over the years we'll phase them out and it won't be a big deal. And I think that's, quite frankly, the frame of reference in which we made those decisions. And then we put a group to work on this, and there's a variety of still confusions as about what that committee's charge really has been over the years, whether it was to proceed with development or whether it was to mine and hold. And that's another topic. This kind of brings, in my head, draws a couple of important lines. One is the university still is overall in charge of this project. Number two, we're not going to be the provider of funding for the development of resources in terms of utilities, infrastructure for this area. That's going to have to be built into whatever market plans occur. And number three, there's a market test that's going to have to be made of projects. I don't think that limits the project. I think the original plan that some people believe guided this project was a plan that was never going to happen. But I do think the plan, what we're doing now is putting some realistic elements into this project. We're bringing it back to the proper party to be exercise its overall responsibility, and we're describing some limits on where we will go, how far we will go in terms of our own expenditures. So I support this resolution.
Regent Simmons.
I'd like to make two comments about this. First, President Kaler may remember that when he and I were looking at the suitability of him becoming president of the university, I was realistic with you about issues you would need to address. You would need to study, understand, they're complex, and you'd need to address when you became president. This is one of them. So I appreciate that you did indeed step up and have your team look at you more. Second, the group of people presenting have given a proposal that I am going to strongly support. And I'll remind us, those of us who've been here for a while, will remember that when the Regents first looked at pursuing a future for UMOR, we weren't sure what ultimately could, should, would happen, but we did create a set of principles to guide action on UMOR. And this proposal is consistent with those principles. We won't remember all of them because we have so many principles, but they included respect for the community. They included respect for the university's resources, human and financial, and being careful and prudent with those. And they included, you'll remember this, Regent Frobenius, because you said it, understanding and application of market-based development goals. So this proposal really, for me, nails it in terms of being within those principles and taking us the next step forward.
Thank you, Regent Simmons. Regent Allen.
I fully support the action we're going to take today, and I agree with many of the comments that have just been made, but I also want to look at another thought. We are a research university, and that means trying things that maybe haven't been tried before, and some of them work out and some of them don't. This one didn't work out quite the way we expected. We're finding our way through it, but I hope the experience doesn't dampen our appetite for trying new things as a research university, because that is what we bring to this state of Minnesota, the willingness to try new things. So we're finding our way through this, and that's good. We've learned lots of lessons, but let it not dampen our appetite for research work.
Regent McMillan and then Regent Devine.
Thank you, Chair Beeson, and thank you to the senior team here for helping fill us in on some of the other parts of this. I come at this with three primary concerns. First is honoring our stakeholders, and I'm glad they're here today. They're our principal stakeholders. Secondly is our ag research long term, and I really appreciate hearing from Dean Burr on that. And thirdly, and maybe most importantly of all, I harbor really significant concerns about distraction for this senior team. And I'm concerned we can't have financial, strategic, or tactical distraction. So I guess paragraph I or subpart I of this thing sends a directional message to the outside world and our stakeholders that we're not going to engage in vertical, and only in rare cases will we engage in horizontal, if I'm reading that correctly. I hope that's a strong enough message, and I hope that as we go forward, we don't end up with this distracting you and your senior team, President Kaler, because the challenges you have are already monumental, and I don't mean to dishonor any element of our community-based partners out there when I say distractions, but we got to get focused on research and stay focused on education and outreach, and development isn't one of those. So I support this, but I harbor some reservation that we could go further to avoid distraction.
Regent Devine.
Thank you, Chairman Beeson. I've been on the board 3 years, and the complexity of this project has taken quite a bit of my time. I've spent time reading all the materials that have been provided. I've toured out there, spent time with senior administration people, which I very much appreciate. Last couple of days, we've had engaged in some more good, solid dialogue relative to the project. The beginnings of my knowledge of this project began with my father, who the genesis of the Manhattan Project started out at Rosemont, which a lot of people maybe don't remember. And in the 70s, I was involved in a project out there, again, research project. School of Architecture built a home of the future out there, and every student was required to participate in time out there. So my relationships with that piece of land out there goes back quite a ways. But aside from that, focusing on what we're here today to do really is a couple of things. And for myself, it's really the issue comes down to just a couple of things. I really agree with most of what's in the amendment in terms of what we're doing. We're setting a direction. We're making some final, some decisions about how to move forward. I very much agree with the project at hand of doing the cleanup. I think we should continue to be the lead on that. And do what we need to do with the state, the federal, and the resources and whatnot that are available on the entire site. Eventually, it should be cleaned up, and we're being good stewards for the state of Minnesota and getting that done and making sure the groundwater and those things are taken care of. I'm a little unclear right now about how we're going to be staffing, budgeting, and what we're going to be doing going forward, but the administration is now going to be charged, as I understand, with the proposal of gathering that, and in future meetings will be presented, I'm sure, the information about how to go about that. The other issue that's gnawed at me this last few months was the issue of really understanding the research mission of the land in terms of how we came to acquire the property originally. I know there's work going on right now at the St. Paul campus to develop a kind of a vision of what they want to be doing as part of the strategic plan. What are the land uses and what are some of the things? I've watched, having grown up in St. Paul, the erosion of the St. Paul campus lands, the research lands that we've had available over there, and we got things on the table right now relative to expansion of rec sports fields over there, the Bell Museum. There's a continual erosion of those lands on the St. Paul campus, which are very important as part of our agricultural mission. And so the preservation of the land in Rosemont does leave not just us, but future boards and future presidents the options of having additional research lands within a reasonable distance here of the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. And so in of that, and respecting the fact that we also have research mission all over the state relative to agriculture, I've toyed with, are we closing the door on the future as we move forward with the development agreement, which in part moves forward to sell the land off and to parcel it and do what we're going to be doing or what we're going to be dealing with in the future. And so to that end, the issues of future boards and future presidents having the options available to them, I'm unclear about how we're doing that. I know we've got the 500 acres. We're going to move things around in order to accommodate the mining operation, which I'm in agreement with. It's our cost recovery vehicle. But I impart as we move forward, and I'm supportive of what we're doing here today, that we look carefully at the agricultural land grant mission and see if 500 acres is enough. Maybe it should be 2,500 acres. I don't know those details, but I would like to leave open for the future boards and for future administrations the ability to be able to look at how they might need the land relative to what might happen in the St. Paul campus, so that we're sending a clear message out in terms of what we're doing, that we're moving forward, we've made decisions, but we're not abandoning our agricultural-based interests in terms of what we need to be doing for the people of Minnesota. So with that, I'm supportive of moving ahead. I think we've got still much to evaluate here in terms of what we're doing, but I think there's a number of things that we've got to still continue to take apart as we have in the past. And I also want to finally just make one last comment. I deeply appreciate all of the work that has gone into this in terms of the past board participants out at Umore Park and the administrations. This has gone through a number of, well, it's gone through every administration since World War II, but much work has been done, and that's been an important component of what's brought us here to this decision-making process today. Thank you.
Regent Lucas, you spent time on this project over the years. Any
I did.
comments?
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I served on the initial, as a public member on the initial LLC board, and I just want to acknowledge what a talented board that was and how far they moved this along, even though some of us maybe don't appreciate what they did. I think they served well, and I think some of their expertise we should not say goodbye to as we move forward. I firmly believe that Umore Park has significant potential to benefit the university over decades, and I don't want to diminish that potential, and I think all of us realize that. But moving forward, I share Regent McMillan's concern about the distraction to the senior leadership here, and I just want to point out that, and I'm sure we all know that the University Foundation now has a very good real estate piece to it and a very robust real estate advisory board, and I hope that as we pick our way along this path that we will call on them.
Thank you, Regent Lucas. I'm going to ask, we're going to wrap this up with a final comment by Regent Simmons.
Oh, thank you, Chair Beeson. I want to make a point. My support for this does not rest on the principle that the university should not compete with the private sector. I just want to make that clear, because I want us to compete with the private sector in the following ways at least. For philanthropic dollars with the private not-for-profits. I want our startup companies we invest our intellectual property in to compete in their spheres. We do compete with the private sector on delivery of health care, delivery of veterinary services, delivery of dental care. So I want to make sure that that isn't misinterpreted in terms of my position. This is one of the ways you learn and you discover and fulfill the mission.
I'll now entertain a motion to approve the resolution that's in your docket materials. Regent Broad has proposed and Regent Johnson has seconded the proposed resolution. Not hearing any further discussion, will all those in favor say aye? Aye. Against? Motion carries. Next, overview of the Governor's Blue Ribbon Committee on the University of Minnesota Medical School and resolution related to the fiscal year 16 and 17 biennial budget request. This is here for both review and action. And I'll ask President Kaler to begin a discussion as the presenters assemble. President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair Beeson, members of the board. Last August, Governor Dayton assembled his Blue Ribbon Committee on the University of Minnesota Medical School with the stated goal to enhance the national prominence of our medical school while saying, and I quote, "The future health of Minnesotans depends on what we do now to train the next generation of medical professionals in our state." Last month, the Blue Ribbon Committee issued its final report, and soon after, the governor included $30 million for the medical school in his proposed fiscal year 2016-17 budget. The governor's investment impacts our biennial budget request, which you previously approved, a request that includes our Healthy Minnesota initiative. So today we're asking the board to include support for the governor's proposal and to, in parallel, reduce the request for Healthy Minnesota in recognition that the clinical research support services that were initially part of our request are now included in the governor's budget proposal. So I'll call on Vice President Fitzenreiter and Medical School Dean Jackson to update us on the Blue Ribbon Committee report, to present your resolution and seek your approval.
Dean Jackson, good morning.
Good morning, Regent Beeson and Regent Committee members, President Kaler. Mr. Fitzenreiter and I will give an update on the legislative proposals for the medical school and the health sciences. As was just mentioned, the Governor's Blue Ribbon Committee on the University of Minnesota Medical School was chaired by Larry Pogamiller, Commissioner of the Office of Higher Education. There were 19 members on this committee, including myself, people from healthcare, systems, education, business, and government. Our work began in August, and we delivered our recommendations to the governor last month. The charge specifically from the governor was to advise on future strategies to strengthen the position of the university's medical school, specifically ensure the medical school's national preeminence, sustain the university's national leadership in healthcare research, innovation, and service delivery, expand the university's clinical services, and address the state's health workforce needs. The recommendations we had a number of them. Our top priorities were to fund 100 new tenure-track faculty in approximately 10 medical discovery teams, restoring the medical school, which would restore the medical school faculty to about our 1990 levels. We had lost about 100 tenure-track faculty over that time period, with the idea that we would be able to raise our NIH funding over 5 to 8 years from our 30th of 144 medical school ranking to in the top 20. There was also money in there for some research infrastructure investment for these medical discovery teams, as well as would benefit others in the academic health sciences, which would include a biospecimen depository, clinical data repository, and a few other relatively small infrastructure investments. There was also, we recommended expanding the Rural Physician Associate Program and Metro Physician Associate Program stipends for medical students who spend up to 9 months in these areas, because we have found that about half of them will then practice in those areas. Also recommending support of the Duluth Rural Scholars Program and planning for a clinical facility up there, creating a statewide network of primary care teaching clinics because the healthcare delivery model is really changing from a hospital specialty focused type delivery system to more outpatient, interprofessional, interdisciplinary type healthcare delivery system, in which we need to be able to train health professionals in these new settings. Also expanding education training programs to address shortages, specifically in geriatrics, mental health, and medical researchers, specifically more MD, PhD slots for the program. Also including increasing the number of scholarships and loan forgiveness programs for students who choose to work in underserved communities, expanding our pipeline programs specifically for underrepresented minorities, and establishing scholarships for underrepresented population. There was not for this biennium budget, but for a potential bonding bill, facilities were recommended for a health sciences education building and clinical research facilities in the Twin Cities. Whether this would be 2 buildings or 1 building, there were some members of the committee thought that 1 building might be easier to get funded. We had several legislators on the committee who thought that might be the better way to go, as well as funds for planning a new health science facilities in Duluth. So I think I missed there we go. So what the governor took these recommendations into account and funded the $30 million over the biennium, specifically for approximately 50 new tenure-track faculty over 8 years to address the state's most pressing health concerns. Target, which would help us achieve a top 20 ranking in at least 8 years. We think we may be able to do that in 5 years, as well as provide some of this money could be used for the clinical research infrastructure investment that I just spoke about, and some money, probably about $1 million or so, for investment in physician training programs that benefit rural underserved communities, specifically the RPAP and MetroPAP money and Duluth Rural Scholars that I just mentioned. So what was not included in the governor's budget proposal was most of the Healthy Minnesota request, other than that clinical research infrastructure. So what was not included was the request for a statewide network of interdisciplinary primary care teaching clinics, expanding those education training programs to address shortages in dentistry and mental health and geriatrics, scholarship money, loan forgiveness for encouraging students from underrepresented communities to pursue health professional careers or to work in underserved communities. And the last part that was not in there was advancing new models of health promotion and care, which does include a money requested for a Minnesota electronic health library, which would allow our health related journals, for example, to be available to healthcare professionals throughout the state of Minnesota and the public, not just to university faculty and staff. So that's where we stand right now. So there is we have been meeting with legislatures to seek their support for the Healthy Minnesota proposal still, which would be in addition to the governor's budget proposal. And I'll turn it over to Vice President Fitzenreuter to explain how this affects what we're asking for in the request.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, on the screen there you can see in the first box up there under columns A, B, and C, you see the Governor Dayton's budget proposal that he included in his recommendations earlier this calendar year for $5 million the first year and $25 million the second year, so biennial math, a $30 million appropriation for the Blue Ribbon Committee. The lower box then translates that into our incremental ask in the resolution that you're going to vote on shortly. But you can see the original column there, column C under the original, that on the bottom line down on line 16, we asked for $127.2 million incremental biennial math increase. The changes in the budget, because of line 10, B2, the Blue Ribbon Commission, where the $30 million is added to our request today, there's a decrease of $9 million in the Healthy Minnesota initiative because some of that is funded through the governor's Blue Ribbon. So you go over to the revised column, and the request for Healthy Minnesota then drops to $25.5 million. You'll be proposing then to adopt the governor's proposal as part of our request for $30 million. And our bottom line request overall to the legislature increases $21 million to $148.2 million for a biennial appropriation of $1.346 billion will be the official ask in the records of the biennial budget system at the state of Minnesota today. And so we're here after that to answer any questions on the resolution.
Thank you. Thank you. Dean Jackson, do you have any final comment?
I do not. I will be glad to take questions. I don't know how the resolution will be considered then at this point.
Good. Well, we'll handle that on our end.
Okay.
I did ask Regent Simmons to give her perspective on the Blue Ribbon Task Force and also on this specific recommendation. This is retired physician, but not yet retired Regent Simmons to give it her industry knowledge and unique perspective. Regent Simmons.
Thank you. The duct tape is off. I appreciate the opportunity of making a comment. I will ask a question. But before I do either, I just want to thank you, Dean. I can't imagine the work you're doing right now on behalf of the university, on behalf of Minnesota. You have extraordinary tasks. You look really good for somebody who should be underwater. And thank you for taking on additional leadership that we so need you to do. I'm excited by this proposal and believe that Governor Dayton launched an initiative to do what he said, and that is elevate our medical school. And we have potential that's here already. And this shot in the arm, which is a pretty good big shot, get your immunizations, they're good for you, is going to give us such an extraordinary opportunity to move things forward more rapidly than we could have otherwise. The nation is in such a competitive environment for top talent in academic medicine, for research dollars, that we have to have that edge to leverage our existing extraordinary assets. So I'm thrilled with what Governor Dayton has done. I would like to compliment the Blue Ribbon Task Force as well, because it was composed of people who care deeply, who came with different perspectives, different backgrounds, and they came together to support something that gives us the great opportunity that we should have. I do want to ask a question. You know my enthusiasm for this proposal, and I'm going to vote for it. I want to have an understanding of how you've looked forward, because you have, at the incremental operating costs we'll experience because of this potential investment.
Dean Jackson.
Regent Simmons, good question. These tenure-track faculty who we will be recruiting, the idea is to recruit faculty who have already a good track record of NIH funding, and by putting together in a team that we will be much more competitive for these larger team-based NIH grants and others. Clearly, this investment, to be sustainable, they have to be able to be successful in getting funded. It is true that it is likely that any of these medical discovery teams will fully cover their costs. However, for the research itself, because there are NIH caps on salary, there are a number of things. However, success breeds success, and if they're successful, this typically results in significantly more philanthropy. It results in significantly more industry collaborations, biotech spinoffs, patents, royalties, and you get it on the other end. And I think that is the financial model that makes this successful. And I think if one looks at the top medical schools in the country, if you're successful as a top research institution, they are typically financially successful for a lot of other reasons that come through, whether it's more clinical income, like I said, philanthropy. There are just all sorts of things that are positive, I think, that will be financially positive.
Follow-up, Regent Simmons.
Yes, and thank you. That's a highly satisfactory answer and thorough. I want us to make sure we as a board recognize that the time frame for this investment return is a long one. It is a highly competitive field, and when we do intellectual property commercialization as part of our financial aspiration or plan, it's a long time before we really reap the benefits. So we have to have that understanding, which means patience. We have to understand the highly competitive environment. And I agree with you. We need this to have the opportunity to succeed. But we also, as a board, need to collectively recognize that got to be patient. It's going to take many years to realize the full potential of this investment.
Other questions or comments from the other regents? Regent Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I want to say thank you, too, to everybody who's worked on this and worked on the Blue Ribbon Committee and how important it is. I'm wholeheartedly behind the amended resolution because for years being on the board, I've recognized, as so many of my colleagues have, how crucial a medical school is to a university and how important the preeminence of our medical school is, and that we really need to work on it. And so I think perhaps, I'm not sure that it was your idea, Dr. Jackson, that cluster hires might be one way to raise that national standing. Whoever's idea it was, I think it's really important and one that I fully support, and thank the governor that he is supporting it also. And so I think this is very important, and I'm very happy to support it.
Regent Broad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think Regent Simmons' point about patience is really a critical one. You know, you can slip fast and you climb slow. And so I think that patience is something we all have to exercise periodically. But I think that our focus on rebuilding the prominence of the medical school and expanding opportunities here in Minnesota and beyond for the next generation of doctors and researchers is critical. But what I really want to focus on, I think, in my comments is the process. And I think that amending our request is a really important step for us to take. And rather than just accept the dollars that the governor has put forward, I think by amending our request, we're buying in to a focus on our medical school in partnership with the state. Last year, we saw some money come our way, and while it's hard to say no to dollars, it was not something that we necessarily reached out and tried to grab and did in partnership with the state. So I think the move that we're making in this amendment is a very clear signal that we want to partner with the governor and partner with the legislature to bring our medical school back to prominence. And so I just wanted to make a point about the process and how important this step is in that partnership.
Thank you, Regent Broad. Regent Devine.
Thank you, Chairman Beeson. I just want to echo and pick up on something that Laura just said. When the governor came to campus here and made his announcement on this proposal, I was excited by what he was presenting, and I certainly appreciate all of the work that went into that by the time that he got here and putting that request together. Clearly, it's a wonderful big step for the University of Minnesota and our commitment to raise our prominence, of our all of our medical areas here for the state. He made one comment, or he shared in terms of how he was somewhat defined it in the press conference, in that he was talking about now the state has made a commitment to Mayo and the destination medical complex that's being built down in Rochester, and then this being a component for the research elements of what's being put together. And again, when he had his hands, he brought his hands together when he was talking about Rochester and talking about the University of Minnesota coming together for the people of Minnesota. So his vision of how he described it visually in that press conference, I thought was very symbolic of the fact that there needs to be a wonderful collaboration between the legislature, between Mayo, between all of us to deliver for the people of Minnesota this level of research, delivery, and reaching the needs of the future. How do you see the rest of those pieces kind of maybe coming together in terms of that vision holistically on the 30,000-foot level?
Well, I think I'm sorry, Regent Beeson, Regent Devine. I think a couple things. One, we do have very strong research partnerships with Mayo Clinic right now with the Biomedical Genomics Project, which has yielded, I believe, over $110 million in NIH funding that we do collaboratively together. The recent regenerative medicine money that we received, and it's built in the base, Jacob Tuller and his counterpart at Mayo are working closely together on that. I think we'll see a lot of very impactful research come out of that. I think one of the things that everyone should understand, if we are able to achieve increase our NIH funding, together with the Mayo Clinic, if you put both of our NIH funding together, we'd be in the top 3 in the country in terms of NIH funding together, put us at that level for a state. That is really is quite remarkable, I think, in that sense. So we do have good research collaborations with Mayo faculty. This money is specifically for the University Medical School, but these teams will bring in whoever they can who can really contribute to the success of these. And since we do have ongoing collaborations and good ones with a lot of the Mayo research, it wouldn't surprise me if we can build on those.
Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I too support this effort, and just a couple of observations I want to make about it, and then I'll finally get to a question at the tail end of this comment. But in my head, this is really an important second step. I go back and look at the Biomedical Discovery District as really the first step and when we created some significant capital assets to do this. And by the way, I personally learned a lesson as a regent during that process, and that's the difficulty of ever looking at an intelligent pro forma on long-term research investments. I mean, fantasy and pipe dream are two terms that come to mind as you do that. It is a challenge. It's a risk. And Regent Allen earlier said the absolute most critical part of this research university's future is the willingness to take these kinds of risks and to move forward. But with the success of this effort, and I hope it will be successful, the state of Minnesota will have made a significant commitment for us to begin to make some significant growth in our mission. Medical research and medical education go hand in hand into the future. If there's any apprehension I have about this, it's how this all will play out on the educational side of our commitment. Among the things that have been discussed around the edges of this in different percentages is sort of the future of residency funding and the sort of bottleneck that exists in the pipeline of medical education because of the government's continued reduction in Medicare funding of residency financing. And I think in my own head, this is an important step, but it's not the total pathway to success. There are still ever significant funding issues, and I think this longer-term question of what kind of residencies and how they will be funded goes forward. Do you have any thoughts on that as to when does that come into our thinking in this process, and how much of an issue is it?
Jackson.
I think, Regent Frobenius, I think the Regents heard from John Andrews at our last session, or at least the special committee on academic medicine, that the IOM report came out to strongly recommend that the way residencies are funded be different, that they actually go to the sponsoring institutions instead of the hospital. In general, our faculty are supportive of that, so that we can place residents in the most effective specialties, or family medicine, mental health, so to best serve the needs of the state, where there is a geographic maldistribution as well as specialty maldistribution at this point. So we'll have to see what happens at the federal level on one hand. On the other hand, the Healthy Minnesota request, as you saw, does request funding specifically for areas in geriatrics, for example, primary care, family medicine, to enhance our training programs in those areas. So that's our strategy, is since we can't really control what CMS will do on these residency training programs, the graduate medical education at this point, we are trying to do what we can at the state level to do that. Did I address that? Yeah.
I just want to make sure we understand that that's still an issue under our agenda.
It is an issue. It is.
Significance.
No. Looks like we're wrapping up comments. I'm sorry. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Beeson, and certainly echo the complimentary remarks of my peers around partnering with the state and looking for opportunities with Mayo. Specifically, that discussion you just had, I'm really thrilled to see the needs of rural Minnesota and the healthcare challenges there, delivery with development of talent from geriatrics to mental health to primary rural-focused positions is just huge. So thank you for that. A question on parts A and C on Fitz's worksheet there, and maybe it's not appropriate at this point, but we don't meet again till the end of March. I'm wondering what the President is hearing and seeing, especially about Part C. Any early comments in terms of reaction? Here we're fine-tuning our request based on what the governor did. Anything around the rest of the request that you can?
President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. Regent McMillan. I'm tempted to defer that question to some of our regents who've been spending much more time at the Capitol, perhaps, than anybody else I know. And the conversations, I would say, are notionally positive, but it's still very early. There aren't targets yet, and it's easy to be supportive when you don't have to make a number of decisions. So we're still in the development phase.
So stay tuned.
That would be right. Yes, sir.
The chair's prerogative, I want to go back to Regent Broad's comment. It is important that this board formally approve these amendments to our legislative request. And for the record, we we reserve the right to evaluate proposals, financial or policy that originate from the legislature, and from individual legislators that may or may not be consistent with the priorities that emanate out of our proposals. So it's important that we talk about that. We always appreciate proposals to fund university activities, but we do have a plan, and the timing of this is such that it worked out to be able to consider this, and we do. This is, I believe, a wonderful proposal, but from an autonomy standpoint, we do need to be aware of that. Any other final comments on this resolution? I'll entertain a motion then.
Move approval. Second.
Regent Allen, Regent Omari, second. Any final discussion? Not hearing anything else? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Thank you, Dean Jackson. Mr. Fitzenreuter. Okay, next I'd like to invite Vice President Herman and Ms. Donovan to the table to discuss the work of the university's Office of Economic Development. We're a few minutes running behind schedule, but go ahead. And
well, Chair Beeson, Regents, and President Kaler, I just want to introduce Dr. Maura Donovan, who is the Director of the Office of University Economic Development, and she's here to talk about her experience over the past year in starting this office, establishing the office, and the activities that she's undertaken and what her plans are for the future.
Thank you, Chair Beeson, members of the board, President Kaler. I am very pleased to be with you this morning. I think it's still morning, and talk to you about the exciting year we've had in getting the Office of University Economic Development off the ground. My comments today are really going to focus on three broad categories or themes. The first is something that I know is familiar to everybody here, and that is the important role of higher education in driving economic development, both locally, regionally, and nationally. The second major theme is that we're blessed here at the University of Minnesota to have a lot of excellent work already underway in economic development, a lot to build from, and a lot of good momentum. And much of that momentum has also been captured very recently in strategic planning efforts that are going on across the system. And then the third topic I will spend time on is giving you a snapshot of where we are today and our ideas going forward in this important area of economic development. I certainly hope that you'll appreciate the enthusiasm that I have for this role, the enthusiasm of my team in this endeavor, and that together we can help spread the word of the importance of public-private partnering and the university's commitment to public-private partnering going forward. The process of economic development has shifted over the past couple decades from being primarily a top-down government model to a much more collaborative model involving companies, businesses, business associations, colleges, and universities together with the state, local, and federal government. This more bottoms-up process is depicted visually by the triple helix, emphasizing that shared responsibility and interrelationships are required to promote economic development and community vitality. An example of the triple helix representation of economic development here in our state is the MnDRIVE initiative, Minnesota's Discovery, Research, and Innovation Economy. MnDRIVE was designed to promote partnering between the university, the state, and industry in order to tackle important challenges, advance research, and strengthen the economy. In the context of today's presentation, it is exciting to emphasize that MnDRIVE has had many successes in its first year, not the least of which is the development of over 75 external partnerships. In addition to the MnDRIVE example, a study that was completed a few years ago provided data on the significant annual economic impact created by the University of Minnesota. This impact derives both from the university's employment and purchasing presence in communities across the state, as well as from the university's key role in developing a trained workforce, providing knowledge and resources to support business success, and developing technology and promoting entrepreneurship. The conversations that I have with the broader community suggest that the public land grant mission of this institution is well understood and seen as supporting statewide economic development needs and opportunities. The launch of the Office of University Economic Development last February came at a very exciting time in which there were lots of strategic conversations taking place on every campus across the University of Minnesota system. Over these past few months, it has also been exciting for me to see alignment emerge between the strategic documents for each of the university campuses and the university research strategic plan, particularly around the importance of economic development and community engagement. This is also the right context, I believe, for me to emphasize that the Office of University Economic Development is here to work with each of the system campuses in any way that facilitates their important local economic development work, and in so doing maximize our statewide impact. I'm going to go back in time just a bit, actually to just over a year ago, when Vice President Herman asked me to engage in a series of conversations to better understand the work in economic development that is already underway and to develop relationships with this university community. I met with many different individuals and groups over the course of months of conversation. I asked similar questions in each meeting in order to find out who each group works with, how people connect with the organization in the first place, how do they navigate from the outside of the university in particular to find resources here at the university to work with in economic development. What type of work and deliverables are at the core of the group's activities? What needs and opportunities have been identified going forward? And whether there's an opportunity and a possibility to leverage the existing work to have additional impact. Not only was it clear from these conversations that significant activity is underway, it was also evident that there are common interests and potential synergies to exploit that could enhance the work's collective economic development impact. The cross-campus analysis led to a recommendation to restructure the former Office of Business Relations as the Office of University Economic Development. This newly defined office has a bold mission to strengthen the university's ties to business and community partners and help grow and diversify Minnesota's economy. Another way of stating this mission is to say that the Office of University Economic Development serves as the public face for economic development at the university, helping external partners navigate this broad and deep institution and connect with resources, services, and expertise at the university and its system campuses, and promoting internal collaboration across the breadth of economic development activities. I and others on my team are committed to making it easier for industry to access university capabilities and for economic development leaders to partner with the university. In addition to our mission, we've set 3 broad goals for the office that together are intended to strengthen local and regional economic development. We recently convened an advisory committee for our office comprised of internal and external leaders. This committee reviewed the goals and endorsed their significance for achieving statewide objectives. So I've spent the first part of this presentation going quickly through sort of a summary of the past, or the year preceding in many ways, the formal launch of this office and the establishment of the mission and goals that we've just gone through. I want to spend the rest of the presentation talking about what we're really focusing on today and going forward. And in particular, what's shown on this slide are what I believe to be 4 areas that could be quick wins for this office. The first is developing a strong collaboration with the University of Minnesota Foundation with a specific focus on co-leading the Corporate Engagement Work Group, or CEW for short. CEW has participation from colleges and units from across the university with the objective of developing a more comprehensive corporate engagement strategy for key business partners. The second area of opportunity is building actually on work initiated by the Office of Public Engagement here at the university to develop an issue area network within the university focused on economic development. The goal is to create and support an interconnected network of university faculty and staff engaged in economic development activities. The network will increase both the awareness of work already underway and the overall impact of the work. The third area of opportunity is partnering with the Department of Employment and Economic Development to develop initiatives to support the needs of small and medium-sized companies in our region. The fourth area is probably the most recently added area of opportunity to this list, and that is partnering with the Initiative Foundation to set up a series of meetings around the state in which we can talk about the services offered by the Office of University Economic Development and facilitate a discussion with the local business and economic development leaders to better understand their priorities for partnering with the university. In addition to the 4 areas of immediate focus, we have also identified several ongoing objectives for this office. The first is to increase the number of external connections that are made, tracking in particular the number of requests our office receives for support, the so-called front door requests. We also track the number of company meetings and visits we participate in, and the number of campus visits by businesses and/or economic development groups that we host or participate in. I'm showing some representative data in this slide from the first 11 months after launching the office. And there are 2 large bars that you see that represent campus visits that we actually were able to co-host with chambers of commerce. So that's one way that we can bring a number of companies to campus, and they get very excited, I can tell you, by seeing firsthand some of the great research and great opportunities that are here at the university. We also are very happy to host individual companies and representatives and do a lot of that as well. I'm pleased to say that we've seen an 18% increase in monthly front door requests since launching the office. I would be happy to see this request rate increase still further, and the roadshow we're planning should reinforce this objective. I would also encourage each of you to help spread the word that individuals who are interested in connecting with the university can reach us at frontdoor@umn.edu. Another ongoing objective for this office is to engage in activities that support the development of new economic development partnerships. This is obviously a long-term endeavor that is really focused on relationship development. This slide shows some of the activities we're engaged in, either on our own or in collaboration with groups inside and outside the university, that are intended to promote partnering with the university. Certainly, we focus on business retention, expansion, and recruitment efforts, particularly with other economic development organizations around the state. We are taking a proactive approach to communication and outreach events, and one example obviously being the Economic Development Roadshow that I alluded to earlier. And we participate in facilitated discussion with business leaders around new collaboration models. We're tracking the activities and results across several metrics, including partnerships that are developed with small, medium, and large companies. Importantly, I believe that efforts with economic development partners can help preferentially target some of the needs of the small and medium-sized companies to complement existing strengths and areas of focus within the university that support the research and philanthropy goals of some of our larger corporations. And then this last objective I want to highlight is part of the ongoing corporate engagement workgroup efforts with the foundation that I mentioned earlier, in which we are taking a portfolio approach to managing strategic company engagement, particularly for those companies that have interests that span multiple university colleges and units. In this slide, I'm showing an analysis of some of the partnering data that inform a portfolio view. In particular, we recently asked the deans and heads of units around the university to send us a list of companies that they felt would benefit from a university-wide engagement strategy. We took that list and pulled the corresponding philanthropy, sponsored project, and external sales data, along as some of the alumni data over multiple years. And in this view, what I've plotted are the results for the companies that scored the highest on cross-institutional interest here at the university versus the current level of engagement for each company, which is a composite of philanthropy, sponsored research, and external sales. The bubbles farthest to the right are the companies that are engaging strongly with the university, and the size of the bubble corresponds to employment of U of M graduates by those companies. This type of analysis allows us to identify areas of engagement opportunity. In this case, what I'm showing in the bottom left corner of the graph are some of the companies that we would strategically now be focusing on and developing specific strategies to broaden and deepen their engagement with the university. So I'm going to end here and just sort of reiterate the themes that I first introduced. Higher ed institutions such as the University of Minnesota are vital to local, regional, and national economic development. The University of Minnesota launched the Office of University Economic Development to support cross-university activities and reinforce the increased strategic focus on economic development that is visible in each of the University of Minnesota campuses. The Office of University Economic Development is up and running with near-term and longer-term objectives and a mission that is clearly intended to make it easier for outside entities to find university resources and develop meaningful partnerships. Personally, I feel privileged to be a part of this effort. I'm very enthusiastic, and I'm also very grateful. What you may not know is that I'm relatively recently here at the university in this role, and I just have to really stress that I have had a fabulous time reaching out to groups across this university, and I'm very, very excited by the welcome that I've received and the enthusiasm to really carry this work forward. So thank you. I'll end my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Donovan. I'm going to open this up for questions and comments. Regent Broad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's very simple. This is fantastic. This is really, really important in terms of creating a very specific access point for partnerships with the university. And when you think about the money and the opportunity cost of navigating bureaucracy, and you just wiped it away in one sense, obviously it's still challenging, but I really wanted to congratulate you. This front door approach is just, I think, going to be very impactful, and I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Other comments? Regent Frobenius.
Thank you. Chair Beeson. Earlier I made some comments about the high priority of the Academic Health Center and all that good stuff, and this is my other topic that falls into the same category, because I think this is a role that the university has to continue to grow and evolve its activity. The problem is nobody would disagree with that objective. This is a question about execution. In fact, how do you make it work? And I've had an opportunity to meet with you in other settings. I'm aware of a visit you're making to Central Minnesota shortly in a few months to really get a broader base of involvement. And I've offered the local people to be of some help in that activity as well. But I just want to encourage you to continue to find ways to take a process that has not quite worked to the level that it has worked in the past, to continue to develop the execution. And I think your sort of direct relationship with business leaders across the state and organizations across the state and tightening their connection to the U is the right way to do it. And let everybody know how all of you please be helpful to these folks as they go ahead and try to accomplish this effort. It's one of the really high valuable works of the University of Minnesota. Thank you for your efforts.
Regent Allen.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do you have a sense yet, in your own mind, are you able to categorize some of the companies in Minnesota with whom we might work in terms of large or small, whether they're Minnesota originally or whether they've come in terms of who's really most interested in working with us? Is there an across-the-board interest, or there are categories of people?
Members of the board, that's a great question, and one that I could probably spend much more time talking about than you have time to give me. The short answer is, by virtue of this portfolio process that I mentioned, we are gaining that kind of understanding. It's an evolving understanding. And there are both clusters of interest that we can track relative to industry clusters. And this provides an opportunity for us, for example, to develop very targeted content around areas of strength at this university that match up with those industry clusters, food and ag being one obvious example. So yes, we're definitely seeing some of that data unfold. And then I would also say that when it comes to some of the smaller companies around the region, what I'm finding personally is that by asking what are their needs, that is a really fabulous first step. It doesn't really matter what their particular industry is. As soon as we ask the question, those needs come forward, and those really do cover a spectrum.
Thank you.
Other comments? Well, Vice President Herman, I want to compliment you on organizing this function, and the President for supporting its funding. This is strategic. We've always been the economic generation business, but arranging our activities and presenting them both for people coming into our front door, as well as when we go out and interact with the stakeholders, the business community and the economic development community, it can be a very powerful move on our part.
Chair Beeson, President Kaler, Regents, let me thank you for your support, and let me indulge you just for a minute, since this is the only opportunity I have, to thank Regent Allen, Cohen, Simmons, or Frobenius, who I've worked with since I've been here, and I am so thrilled to have had your support and your expertise and your advice over the first couple of years of my tenure, and I wish you all the best of success as you move forward in whatever happens after you leave our board. But thank you very much for your help you've provided to me.
Thank you, Vice President Herman. Next is an update on NCAA reforms, the ever-changing world of intercollegiate athletics. Since our annual update on athletics in July, the NCAA has enacted new legislation. Athletic Director Norwood Teague and General Counsel Donahue, we look forward to your update on the current landscape in college athletics and the impact these rules have on the university. And I'll ask here again for President Kaler to, using a golfing phrase, tee it up.
Tee it up. There you go. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're getting closer to spring, and
We are, and the balls get smaller and smaller, yes. Members of the board, never has there been a time of more rapid change in big-time intercollegiate athletics than the time we are in now. As president of the university, I'm very much aware of this, and I now have the role as the Big Ten's representative on the NCAA Division I Board of Directors, so I have a more national perspective now, too. In that role, I was at the NCAA convention in Washington last month as part of a historic moment when the nation's 5 largest conferences achieved decision-making autonomy for policy issues around student-athlete welfare. There, we adopted legislation to ensure that student-athlete scholarships cover the full cost of a college education, thereby taking a significant step towards meeting our commitment to provide academic security and success and to fully deliver an undergraduate education. We also created a pathway and a timeline for addressing the key reform issues that will enhance the support of student-athletes, including regulating time demands, which will ensure an appropriate balance between athletics participation and the academic obligations and opportunities presented to all students. This legislation by the 5 major conferences, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Southeastern Conference, and the Pacific 12, demonstrates our commitment to continued action of providing a safe, rewarding, and equitable environment for our student-athletes as they pursue their education and ultimately get their degree. Today, universities such as Penn State and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill are facing the most pressing issues of accountability and oversight. The outright payment of student-athletes and compensating them for their likenesses in various commercial products is in the national conversation, and lawsuits are underway around these issues. So to discuss some of these items and more, I'll call on our Gophers Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, Norwood Teague, and General Counsel Bill Donahue. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Teague, Athletic Director Teague, and General Counsel Donahue.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here. Chair Beeson, Board of Regents, autonomy has happened, as Dr. Kaler just mentioned. In the summer of 2014, the NCAA proposed that the 5 largest conferences be given autonomy and adopting rules relating to student-athlete welfare. The 5 conferences below that Dr. Kaler mentioned are included in this: the ACC, the Big Ten, Big 12, the Pac-12, and the SEC. On August 7th, 2014, the Division I Board of NCAA adopted the autonomy model. The rules approved by the autonomy group cannot be overridden by the overall NCAA membership, and there were 4 proposals and 1 resolution that were adopted by this autonomy group. The first is financial aid oriented, and that is cost of attendance. What is currently allowed in cost of attendance? The current NCAA rule allows for schools to grant financial aid that covers tuition, fees, room and board, and other course-related book requirements. The new rule adds also any other expenses related to attendance at the institution up to cost of attendance. If you look at this slide here, what is cost of attendance? Cost of attendance is the cost of attending an institution calculated by the institution pursuant to federal law. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the brackets. This is the new elements of the athletic financial aid, which is so in the public discussion currently. Here at the University of Minnesota, transportation is valued at $194, and personal miscellaneous is valued at $2,000. The next proposal that was put forth is concussion safety protocol, which obviously has been in the news quite a bit as well. What the NCAA rules currently require since 2010, that each school have concussion management plan for student athletes that requires education, evaluation by medical staff and guided by your medical staff on campus. What does the new rule require? The new rule retains the requirements of the existing rule, but adds on the following: baseline testing, reducing exposure to head injuries, policy on return to learn, and assuring that proper concussion management is made available to all student athletes. What do we have here at the University of Minnesota currently in place? We have a robust policy, one that is extremely comprehensive, and I have seen it firsthand. I feel very good about what we have. It's very protective of our student athletes and clearly places the decision for return to activity, for athletic activity, in the hands of our physicians. Again, clearly puts the return to play activity in the hands of our physicians. The third proposal of autonomy: student athlete insurance against loss of value. What the NCAA rule currently allows for is for a student athlete to borrow against their future earnings potential to purchase insurance against disability, injury, or illness. Again, disability, injury, or illness. Whereas the new rule adds in loss of value. What is loss of value? Loss of value is an option for an elite student athlete in case of illness or injury that causes their athletic stock to drop. For example, if we have an athlete here who is a first-round draft pick, who's a projected first-round draft pick, who injures their knee and subsequently drops to the 5th or the 6th round, the insurance would cover the approximate difference in compensation. Now, obviously, insurance companies are going to be the drivers of this, and they will determine what that is, but it can be complicated, but it will be the athletic stock value drop that the insurance company will determine well in advance. The last proposal is non-reduction or renewal of aid for athletic reasons. Currently, the existing rule prohibits institutions from reducing aid for a student athlete during the school year. All athletic aid is renewable at the end of a school year. The new rule requires that, or prohibits the reduction of non-renewal of a student athlete's financial aid for the following reasons: student athlete's athletic ability, performance, or contribution to the team's success, an injury, illness, physical or mental condition, or any other, again, I think this is key, any other athletic reason. What's the impact of the new rule? Simply put, it's added protection for the student athletes, that they cannot have their scholarship dropped, taken away for athletic reasons. In other words, if they're not contributing on the field, they're not playing well, they can't have their scholarship taken away from them. It's added protection for the student athletes. Impact on Gopher athletics: cost of attendance. First of all, increased annual cost of 322 full scholarships is estimated somewhere around above or below $1 million. Concussion protocol, we feel very good about our policy. Currently, we'll do some additional tweaking to that, but what we have in place now is comprehensive and robust. Loss of value insurance, we'll see where that lands. How many student athletes want to take advantage of that or either explore that with an insurance company. Reduction or non-renewal of a scholarship, again, it's added protection for our student athletes. Rarely do we have a scholarship that's taken away, if ever, for athletic reasons, and that can be appealed as well. I think nationally this is just added protection, as I mentioned earlier, for student athletes to not get in a situation, which are usually, I think at other schools, very rare, where possibly they feel like their athletic aid is being taken away for athletic reasons. This is added protection for student athletes.
Okay, the other thing that's going on here are lawsuits. When we talked to you in July of 2014, we gave you an update on 3 or 4 lawsuits which were then current. They have, of course, changed a little bit, and this is our chance to tell you a little bit more about the changes that have taken place. The first of those and the most prominent is the O'Bannon litigation. When we talked to you in July, the case had been tried. It was under advisement by the judge. She issued her decision on August 8th. And what she found most significantly is that she found that the NCAA rules with respect to name, image, and likeness violate the antitrust laws of the United States. She issued an injunction. The injunction is effective August 1st, 2015, coming up. And what it does, it prohibits caps on scholarships below cost of attendance. Oddly enough, the autonomy group has moved to pay for cost of attendance. The second thing is it allows licensing revenue to be paid to student athletes. That is not addressed by the autonomy group changes. The NCAA has appealed the decision to the Ninth Circuit. The case is scheduled for oral argument on March 17th, and both sides, this is unusual, have asked for expedited review by the Ninth Circuit in hopes of having a decision before the August 1st, 2015 injunction date. So that's the status on O'Bannon. And this is the other feature of the O'Bannon case. This is often referred to as the Keller portion of the case. It's the case against EA Sports having to do with video games. This is the use of avatars in video games that look like and are easily identifiable as football players or basketball players at schools. EA Sports agreed to pay $40 million, and the NCAA agreed to pay $20 million. It is being administered by a neutral administrator, and they are in the process of notifying the student athletes at the University of Minnesota. We last week submitted our information to the administrator. We identified 512 student athletes whose current names and addresses we have given to the administrator. What will happen is they will receive notice of their participation in this, and there will be a fairness hearing on July 16th, 2015 in front of Judge Wilkins. And if Judge Wilkins confirms that it's fair after hearing any objections from those people who are notified, money will be paid out. It is our expectation that that money will be paid out sometime yet this year. Let's go to the next one. The third set of lawsuits. I've entitled this Jenkins. Jenkins is one of many lawsuits that were transferred out to Judge Wilkins by the multi-district panel of the federal courts, and they were transferred out there in 2014. Jenkins is the most far-reaching of those, as I indicated on the slide. There's a guy named Jeffrey Kessler, who's the lawyer in that case. He's famous for, I think, establishing free agency in the NFL. So he is seeking to invalidate all restrictions on compensation for student athletes, not just limitations that go to name, image, and likeness. He wants it to be a free market. The NCAA has brought a motion to dismiss in that case. That motion was denied by Judge Wilkins in October, and the case is currently in discovery. Moving on to the NCAA concussion litigation. That's another consolidated set of cases. It's several concussion lawsuits that were consolidated again by the multi-district panel in front of a federal judge in Illinois. A settlement had been reached in that case for $75 million. The $75 million provided for monitoring, research, study. It didn't provide any money to compensate any of the victims, but it was intended to deal with the injunctive aspects of the case. The judge rejected the settlement, and they are back redoing it, hoping to alleviate his concerns because the judge thought it wasn't a broad enough class. He thought they hadn't made enough effort to contact all of the class members. It still remains that the cases, all of the compensation cases continue to exist. I'm pleased to inform you none of them involve the University of Minnesota. So in Northwestern, this is the unionization effort that has taken place at Northwestern University. It took place in the spring of 2014, and the regional director of the NLRB ruled that football players are employees. An unanticipated ruling, an unusual ruling. Northwestern, they held an election because of that determination. Northwestern appealed to the full NLRB, and currently that is under advisement by the NLRB. While the vote took place, the ballots were not opened, and they will be opened if in fact the NLRB decides that they are employees, and once they are opened, we will know whether those 85 football players who played for Northwestern during the 2013-2014 season believe that they should be unionized. If the NLRB decides against the regional director, then those ballots will never be opened, as far as I know. If in fact they're opened and they want to have a union, then Northwestern is faced with the decision as to whether or not they recognize the union. They have said publicly on numerous occasions that they will not. And that will lead to more litigation, employing more lawyers, a good thing, of course. And it will ultimately end up in a federal court where a decision will be made whether or not these 85 football players are really employees or whether they are really student athletes. I think that's it. More than happy to answer questions or to hear comments.
Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I have a question on the cost of attendance estimates that you have. It came to about $2,200 for the 300 XX scholarships. How does that compare to what other schools are considering?
Chairman Beeson, Regent Lucas, it's really all over the map. In the Big Ten, I would say we're probably in the middle to bottom third. There are, the cost of attendance numbers are established by on-campus financial aid office. So there's a lot of moving parts in that area right now. It is probably the most interesting question there is out there, the disparity in those. So we'll see how those move or how they don't move in probably the next 18 months to 2 years. But we're probably in the middle, a little bit maybe bottom third in the Big Ten. Does that answer your question? That's a big question. That's a big question.
Yeah, there's a lot of room in that. Yep. Thank you.
Regent Allen.
You know, the cost of attendance is a long ago figure. It's been used for years by admissions people and financial aid, and pretty well defined, not specifically, but pretty well defined. But my worry is that this new approach within the sports area will mean pressure on financial aid and admissions people generally to raise the cost of attendance in order that it will raise the ability to put more money into the finances. I don't know any way around that. I just think that is something that's going to have to be watched very carefully.
Thank you. Regent Broad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Donahue, I'm wondering about if some of these court cases come to pass, the athletes are deemed to be, just thinking forward, if they are deemed to be employees, if then we pay them in addition to scholarships, where does that leave us from a standpoint of professional versus amateur athletes? Does that drop down to high school? I mean, what is the definition then?
Council Donahue.
Region Beeson, Region Broad. If that revolution takes place, we will appear in front of you many, many more times to talk about those issues. It is, the people who do what I do believe that the student athletes are actually students and they're not employees. If they are employees, there's a ton of implications. There's tax implications. There's fairness implications. There's workers' compensation implications. There's the whole panoply of things that happen with respect to people who are employees of the university. And it's a ways off, I think, and it will be it'll be a big day if and when that actually happens.
Regent Frobenius.
Back to the question prompted by Regent Lucas, this question, and you may have said this, Mr. Teague, in your opening comments. I assume that the University of Minnesota has to have a common cost of transportation, personal, miscellaneous for all athletes. That we can't get down to an individual bidding war per student, and an institution has to have some basis for adjusting that other than a bidding war. Is that correct, or are we ultimately on a slippery slide to a bidding war?
Chair Beeson, Regent Frobenius, I feel like we're being consistent. A bidding war is not something we ever want to get into, and we've worked with financial aid on campus, and certainly it's not a situation where we want to pressure anyone to raise anything. And I feel good about where we are and what we're doing and staying in the middle.
Follow up. Are your colleagues across the country doing the same?
Chair Beeson, Regent Frobenius, I feel like they are. We haven't heard a whole lot. Right now, the main thing you hear across the country is just the disparity or the differences in those costs of attendances, and there has not been a great deal of change that we've heard about in terms of them moving their numbers. But I think we all need to watch that and see where it lands.
Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Athletic Director Teague, I'm curious about the attitude of present-day athletes at the University of Minnesota as they sure they're aware of these proposals and what might be coming forward. Do they discuss it with coaches and with you that they hope these reforms take place? Or are they saying, I'm a student athlete at the University of Minnesota on scholarship, I'm appreciative, gaining an education and ready to go out into the world? I'm just trying to get a sense of an athlete here at the university.
Chair Beeson, Regent Johnson, I don't want to speak for them, but I think across the board, the sense that I get is they know they're student athletes. A lot of them don't even know this is going on because they're busy with their schoolwork and they're being a college student. I think cost of attendance is a good thing. I think that is filling a gap that has been needed. Anything beyond that, I'm not sure they don't know a lot of what's going on, and they're more concerned about what's the test they have this week and what time the practice is that afternoon.
Very good, thank you.
President Kaler.
So, thank you, Chair Beeson. Regent Johnson, you should also know that the autonomy group is governed by a representative from each conference, and each school gets a vote. So there's 65 votes. In addition to that, there are 3 former or current student athletes from each of the 5 conferences who also have votes. So there's 80 votes total, 15 of whom are students. One of the 3 students representing the Big Ten is Chris Hawthorne, who graduated last year, was our place kicker on the football team. He now works at Bowling Green University in the athletics department. And the student athlete comments during this discussion around these autonomy votes, these 4 that passed, was deep and profound and heard well by others in the room. So the student voice is quite prominent in this conversation nationally, actually.
Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. Thank you for the presentations. It seems like we're tackling everything today, from healthcare to in delivery to sports, so on and so forth. I'm glad to hear about the group of 80 because I think I mentioned this in July when you were before us. I always worry that when we start to play with the numbers game and as we try to compete from the University of Minnesota, how this might impact recruitment if cost of attendance suddenly skyrockets at Ohio State and there's some fuzziness in what is cost of attendance and students are saying, oh, I get this amount, so on and so forth. So I'm glad to hear that the committee of 80 is there. I also am interested in the insurance piece and the purchase of insurance against their future earning potential. I suppose I'm wondering how popular that is right now. I mean, is that something that a large number of student athletes are using? And then if not, this next piece of kind of loss of value moving forward, does that seem like it's going to be something that makes it more enticing for students? Chair
Beeson, Regent Omari, again, I think it's unknown how many will take advantage of it and how many will qualify for it. There's a lot of debate and talk about that. The current rule, which allows for disability or not being able to play anymore type coverage, I've seen the last 20 years that happen probably, someone take out that type of insurance probably 3 times, 4 times. So it's very rare. It's usually an elite athlete who is just trying to protect themselves as they're in that situation. But I don't know what will happen. It'll be interesting again what insurance companies will cover and what stats they use, what equations they use to figure those values.
Regent Allen and then Regent Cohen, then we'll wrap up this discussion.
I just want to make two things clear about my previous remarks on the cost of attendance. Number one, I fully support the move to that. I think that's a good idea. Secondly, I want to say that we run a very clean operation here, and I think we all ought to be proud of that. But we do know that there have been abuses around the country, and there will probably continue to be abuses around the country. And we need to watch about the way cost of attendance is defined in some locations to be sure that everybody's playing on, if you will, the same level field.
Thank you, Regent Allen. Regent Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. And I too support the cost of attendance. I'm wondering, President Kaler, in your committee of, or the committee of 80, whether there are grave concerns about it moving past the cost of attendance and what the students or the former student athletes, particularly those 15, what their perspective is.
President Kaler.
Chair Beeson and Regent Cohen, I think this move now is a good place. I think people are comfortable where they are. But this is a very big step. It took years to move through the NCAA procedures, which are themselves laborious. But I don't feel a spirit to go farther than this right now.
Just one really quick.
Regent Allen.
Just one really quick. You know, I see we're in good company of the Big 12, it was Pac-12, and we're just 10. I renew my point that we maybe ought to think of ourselves as the Big 10-4. Sorry about that.
On that.
Thank you.
No?
One more time.
Yep.
Thank you, Director Teague, and thank you, Council Donahue. Yeah. Okay, let's go to our committee reports then. We'll lead off with Regent McMillan and the report of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. The Finance Committee met yesterday and has 2 action items and 3 discussion items that I'll highlight. First of all, the Enterprise System Upgrade Program budget. The committee is recommending approval of a budget amendment in the amount of $1.25 million for getting us from today until the point when we go live in April 2015. That amount is reflective of the 2-month delay that was wisely made to make sure we're dealing with the risks inherent in a project of that size and scope. The committee addressed this at some length yesterday, and that amendment of that amount is about a 1.5% increase to the current budget, which gets us through the go-live date, and then we're into the post-go-live implementation. So I move adoption of the Enterprise System Upgrade Program Budget Amendment.
Second. There's a motion, a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. Will all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Against, motion carries.
We also had a substantial consent report, and given the board meeting calendar, we don't meet again until May and hadn't met since December, so there's quite a significant number of contracts in the consent report. Committee discussed those, and I move their adoption.
There is a motion. Second. There's a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against, motion passes.
And discussion items, it was a big day for annual reports. Coming off of a conversation about athletic outcomes, let me just say the Consolidated Endowment Fund won a national championship. Their 20.4% return on that fund was ranked them first amongst all of our peer institutions. So,
Regent McMillan, that was last year now.
Yes, yep, it was. It was for the last year, which we've always got a little lag here, but anyway, Mr. Mason and his team are doing an outstanding job there, and that warranted our attention. Really, the driver there is overweight allocations in venture capital and some really interesting strategies that they've been successful with. So anyway, I raised that for your attention, and then we also had our annual capital financing and debt management report, and we went through the university's roughly $1.3 billion in outstanding bonds, and compared that to what we've got in assets. And all in all, for the board's report, I would just say we're in a very good place. very healthy debt to asset ratios, and we maintained, most importantly, our Moody's AA1 and S&P AA ratings, which are important to the financial health of the university. So that was a good discussion, and then we also had an annual insurance and risk management report, looking at what we accomplished in 2014, what those highlights were, what the goals for 2015 are, and several key programs there, some pilot work around risk management, and lastly, noted that the cost of risk for fiscal year 14, which is really a sum of all the money we spend around insurance and otherwise, was up about 5% for the year, totaling about $13 million, up from 12.5 the year before, which is reflective of the growing risk challenges the university faces with its breadth and scope. But overall, another good report, and we had several information items that I won't highlight here.
Thank you, Regent McMillan. We'll accept your report. Next is a report on the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. On our consent report, the committee unanimously approved two distinct items. One is the required by the legislature joint university and MnSCU report on post-secondary planning, and the other was a series of program additions, changes, and discontinuations. I move adoption of the consent report.
A second.
There's a motion and second on the consent report. Is there any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, motion passes.
In non-action items, the committee had a critically important discussion on balancing enrollment and financial aid strategies for the Twin Cities campus. Our conversation really focused on the need to dynamically balance our need and merit aid. We didn't conclude that there's a right single ratio here. Rather, the ratio should shift in response to demographic changes and to academic goals. This is a crucial and ongoing conversation that the committee and the board will continue to engage in over time. The committee also heard about evidence-based strategies for diversifying our faculty. It seems that something akin to planetary alignment has allowed the university to adopt a focus on addressing bias in faculty hiring and to make great strides in a short period of time. One major driver of this alignment, it should be said, is President Kaler's leadership on the issue. We have heard him say many times that the coming demographic changes are striking and the university must look like its current and future students. The enthusiasm and rigor guiding this work are evident, and we were not surprised to hear that the university's equity and diversity vision framework has been praised as a model for other institutions by our peer institutions. The committee also heard an impressive report on student-athlete advising and support that takes place in this building at the McNamara, or I guess not in this building, but the same name, McNamara Academic Center, that is the MAC. Operating under the Office of the Provost, the MAC walked us through the checks and balances that lend credibility to the efforts made to keep our student athletes moving toward timely and successful completion of their degree programs. And it's working. Minnesota, the university, is a leader among public institutions on several important outcome measures. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Simmons. Next is a report of the Audit Committee. Regent Broad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee met and has no action items for the board. We have a number of discussion items, in fact, 2 pages full, so buckle up. The first, the Audit Committee reviewed the results of additional work completed by our external auditor, which is Deloitte. This includes the required federal A133 compliance audit, the Minnesota Office of Higher Ed Financial Aid Programs examination, a review of how student groups are handling student fees, and audits related to grants from the Minnesota State Arts Board for both the Weissman Art Museum and Northrop Auditorium. Of course, we showed strong results for all of these areas for the university. The Audit Committee also received a presentation on the newly instituted Uniform Guidance regulations from the Federal Office of Management and Budget that relate to federal-sponsored research. The presentation outlined how these changes implemented on December 24th will impact the university It is the hope that by using a more metric-based approach to the new regulations will balance the need for waste, fraud, and abuse, while also streamlining regulatory requirements. Of course, this process is not easy, it's complex and uneven over a number of different regulatory bodies. And it will be a challenge for us to manage through. The Audit Committee also reviewed the Internal Audit Quality Assurance Report. The standards for professional practice of internal auditing require that internal audit functions have formal external reviews performed every 5 years, and ours was performed this year. The team included exceptional outside experts that thoroughly reviewed our internal audit process and our internal audit function here at the University of Minnesota. And I'm very pleased to report that the team gave our Office of Internal Audit the highest rating possible. And in very Minnesotan form, that highest rating possible is generally conforms. But generally conformed should not be construed as anything other than the highest rating. And we're very pleased with that report. I want to congratulate Associate Vice President Gail Klatt and her team for outstanding work that they're doing. They are leading edge in a lot of ways and should be congratulated. And we rely on them for this board and this university significantly, and they play a critical role. The Audit Committee also received an update on internal audits performed by the Office of Internal Audit, and I would encourage you to review these results. They were provided in your packet, related to university researchers, executive officer, and regent expenses. And lastly, we had a wonderful conversation on the perspectives of governance in higher education and trends in the higher education landscape. The Audit Committee was very pleased to invite Mr. Robert Keppers. And Mr. Keppers is a University of Minnesota graduate, but also a senior partner at the Deloitte Center for Corporate Governance and a proud member of the Carlson Board of Trustees. He's proof that Minnesota Gophers are in the highest entities in corporate governance. The committee discussed the role of the audit function, risk oversight, governance, best practices, and insights in the regulatory environment related to higher education. One of the key items that came from this discussion is how to ensure that our new strategic plan is implemented successfully, and what is the role of both the board and the audit committee in making sure that that occurs. And I'm sure we will continue those conversations going forward. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Broad. Regent Allen, report of facilities and
Thank you,
Operations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One action item, capital budget amendment for the design of the Athletes Village. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the design for the Intercollegiate Athletics Athletes Village on the Twin City campus. 340,000 square feet of space that will provide for current and future needs. It will be placed on the east side of the Bierman and Gibson Nagurski buildings. Project funding will come from external sources, although there may be some bridge financing while waiting for all of the gift money to come in. This is for design services only. A future request will come forward for further work on the project. I move approval of the capital budget amendment.
Second.
There's a motion and second to amend the capital budget. Is there any discussion on this matter? Not hearing any. Will all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion carries.
Two discussion items. The first, an update on the sustainability effort. First of all, I'll say if you had heard the presentation firsthand, you would recognize the extent and the enthusiasm with which the folks involved in that have gone at this. I will give an example of the work, but it's only an example. I wish I could cite more of the figures. 60% of the campus electricity is renewable at Morris. 49% of our waste system-wide was recycled in 2014. A peak occasion was 85% of the waste at one of the Twin City Bank Stadium Gopher games. Food has been harvested and provided from local gardens. We have a system-wide commuter program for bikes and automobiles. On the bikes alone, that you can pick up at various stations around. There were over 1 million miles ridden by faculty, staff, and students. Those are just examples of the kinds of things that are going on. But there is a long, long list of such items, and that sustainability effort is really moving. Second discussion item, long-range planning, balancing stewardship, focus, and growth. We've received an extensive briefing on the process that's being used. There is a tremendous amount of very methodical and meticulous work going on to analyze what needs to be done, to find out as far ahead of time as we can of what particular buildings need what kind of attention, to find out if you're going to do this project here, what else might be done with it at the same time to save money instead of spending more later. A very thorough report, and quite frankly, it's an area I've had a very great interest in, and I was very impressed by the work that's being done. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Allen. Next, Regent Frobenius, faculty and staff.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. The committee unanimously recommends approval of its consent report, including the appointment of Dr. Valerie Forbes as Dean of the College of Biological Sciences on the Twin City campus effective July 31st. In conferral of tenure for Dr. Forbes, Dr. Forbes holds a PhD in coastal oceanography from sunny Stony Brook, State University of New York, Stony Brook, a place we have some knowledge of.
Sunny or SUNY? Both.
SUNY at Stony Brook.
Snow.
Soon. Never mind. Comes to us from and she also comes to us from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, which adds to her credentials. I move approval of the consent report.
There's a motion to approve the consent report and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against, motion passes.
You guys make it tough to go out. The committee, Crookston has we heard an interesting problem from Crookston. Crookston has a problem that the faculty has, at Crookston is a disadvantage to take courses that would allow them to advance their credentials and their degree because it's a 4.5-hour drive to most classes down here. So Chancellor Wood and the group have put together a 4-year pilot of an advanced degree tuition reimbursement program that would allow them to, certain number of their faculty to be reimbursed for up to $5,000 per year for courses at either UND or any other North Dakota schools, anything placed someplace closer. And cost and time frame parameters exist. It's an interesting proposal and was not an action item since it is a pilot program. Committee also heard the latest in a series of items over the past year on HR needs in different parts of the university. This month it was CLA, College of Liberal Arts, which employs 21% of our faculty, almost 16,000 students, which makes it one of the largest campuses in the state of Minnesota all by itself. CLA has nonetheless become smaller recently since reaching a peak in enrollment 10 years ago and is in the midst of a large-scale strategic effort under a new dean to reposition itself to become a destination college. You're doing some fascinating things. Next, we received results of the 2014 engagement survey, which is round 2. The response rates exceeded years 1 record rates, 68% of staff, 52% of faculty. That's about the highest response rate we have got for almost anything at the U for a period of time. And the results were excellent again. There are not many universities doing this in the private in the university world. The private sector is way ahead of public universities in this process. That being said, if you would look at our norms of performance against Hay's high-performing groups, we would be at the norm of a high-performing group in the Hay data of private data organization. There's a lot of good news in this process, and this is very important work going on and has the full support of the board. Finally, the committee heard an update from Vice President Brown on metrics related to 4 HR enterprise-level dashboards. These metrics include workforce distribution, workforce flows, costs, workforce return on investment. I encourage you to review the slides from her presentation for a good overview of a number of key trends in terms of female faculty, faculty of color, turnover rate, salary increases compared to benchmarks, and some productivity data on student output per employee. We also deferred the annual compensation report, which has now been established due to the absence of a key staff person and some time constraints. You all will get to hear that at the June meeting, and you will look forward to that report. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Frobenius. We'll move next to the report of the Litigation Review Committee. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. The Litigation Review Committee met on February 12th, 2015. Yesterday, a resolution was considered and approved authorizing the closing of the meeting for the discussion of matters subject to the attorney-client privilege. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent McMillan. Regent Cohen, report of the Special Committee on Academic Medicine.
Well, you'll all like the length of my report because the committee did not meet. That concludes my report.
Okay, we are moving along well with time. Regent Broad.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't want to do this under old business, so is it appropriate for new business?
Well, it depends on what it is.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Chairman, we have a member of this board who is having a birthday soon, and I just wanted to make sure that that we gave our greetings and our happy birthday to Regent Allen. He has a big birthday coming up, and a decade to go until he got to the. He said he wants to be skiing in his 90s, so we've got a little bit of space to go. But I wanted to wish you a happy birthday under new business, by the way, not old business.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Another milestone, Regent Allen.
In Lincoln's words, 4 and we're heading.
Thank you. Any other new business? Well, with that, again, farewell, departing regents. We'll see you down the road. I will call this meeting adjourned.
Very good. Very good. 15 minutes early.
They like that.
Thank you, Brian. Let's goodbye for a motion.